Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. It's our special schedule reaction, instant reaction, freaking out. The schedule's out. We know what's going on. I'm Schmeelk, he's Citak. Thanks for being with us, everybody. So the Giants schedule is out, folks. And look, we knew the opponents, Matt. We knew that this was going to be a tough schedule. There was no way to arrange these teams where it was not going to be tough. It's just a matter of the rows in which they came in, and we'll kind of go through it top to bottom. But nothing I saw in this thing is a huge surprise.
Yeah, again, as you mentioned, we've known what every single matchup was going to be this upcoming season. We've all seen, the strength of schedule rankings and stuff. So we knew that the schedule on paper was going to look hard. But I just want to remind fans, this is the strength of schedule mark. That's based on teams' records from last year. As we know, the NFL changes from year to year. So all I'll say on that front is don't take that to heart so much. Take it with a little bit of grain of salt, because teams that were good last year may not be good this year. Teams that were bad last year could be good this year. There's only so much that last year's record can tell you about the upcoming season.
Correct. Though historically, the teams that have had the hardest strength of schedule have not done particularly well. But 2 out of the last 4 years or 2 out of the last 5, the team has made the playoffs that had the toughest strength.
There have been outliers.
So they're outliers. So there's always a chance. All right, so I kind of broke this into pods here because I think, it's weird. They kind of put groups of games together that kind of makes sense. So the first 2 games of the year, at Washington, September 7th, to Sunday, 1 p.m. At Dallas, 1 p.m. on September 14th. Odd that at Dallas is not a 4:25 game. Giants-Cowboys is usually almost always a 4:25 game.
It is,
I was surprised by that. But 2 road division games to start the year, and this is a pet peeve of mine. I've said this consistently, I hate early season division games because I want these division opponents to figure out who they are first and then play each other. I don't like the week 1, week 2 division games because teams are still kind of figuring out what this version of their team is looking like. So don't love that. But boy, the schedule makers decide to give the Giants a really big test their first 2 weeks on the road against 2 good division rivals.
I will say, though, that on the flip side, based on how, I guess, the general public is looking at the Giants going into this year, I think it's fair to say the Giants will be considered underdogs in both of those games.
On the road, for sure.
On the road.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, it's a known thing that the first, let's call it 4 weeks of the season, teams are kind of figuring themselves out. I think that gives the Giants a chance to upset those division rivals.
You'd rather be the underdog in those matchups than the favorite.
100%.
I agree with that on that.
And especially on the road, the Giants are going to go into those games. No one's going to be giving them a chance. Yeah. It's going to sort of be we got nothing to lose. Let's go out there and prove everyone wrong. So I don't mind the 2. I'm kind of a fan of getting 2 of those division road games out of the way early. If you could steal even just one of those games, you're setting yourself up well for heading into the next stretch.
And look, Dallas has a new coach, so you think maybe they don't have their stuff together yet. New coordinator on offense, new coordinator on defense. Maybe they're still figuring things out. So yeah, I think that's the hope, that you catch those 2 teams before they hit their stride. My theme this offseason, I think the Commanders are going to take a little bit of a step back, so maybe the Giants can start that. But look, I think this is an opportunity. To your point, maybe these teams aren't rolling yet, but just speaking in generally, if you can come out and beat one of these 2 divisional opponents and rivals on the road in the first 2 weeks, that can put your season off to a really nice start. It gets you a division win early. It gets you a road win early. And if you can figure out a way to win one of those, again, the Giants have had success in Washington. They have not had success against Dak Prescott in Dallas. But if you could figure out a way to get one of those, it kind of gives you some really, really positive, good feelings heading into the rest of the year.
Yeah, it gives you confidence, honestly. It's going to give the locker room some confidence. And, obviously, Jaden Daniels is coming off a phenomenal rookie season, one of the best we've seen in a long time. I will say, I'm, again, a fan of having the Giants go up against him week 1 because we kind of know what to expect from Jaden Daniels. We saw how he played last year. I don't think his game is going to change drastically from year 1 to year 2.
And same coordinator, too. No changes
there. Same coordinator. However, the Giants' defense is going to look different because there's a lot of new talent on every level of the defense. Opposing offenses don't exactly know how Shane Bowen is going to utilize, especially those guys up front with Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, Dexter Lawrence. They don't really know what sort of exotic blitzes Shane Bowen might have up his sleeve. I think the Giants have a chance to really surprise Jaden Daniels with some looks, some blitz schemes and things. I actually am of those two divisional matchups to start the season, I'm kind of glad that Jaden Daniels is week 1 because I think the Giants defensive coaching staff has a chance to really just throw some surprises out there that the Commanders might not be expecting and could confuse a young quarterback in Jaden Daniels.
They also have a little bit of a reconstructed offensive line. Laramie Tunsil's new. They're probably going to move Brandon Coleman into guard, is my guess, based on. And then they got a right tackle. Did they draft a right tackle? Josh Connolly. Thank you. And might be his first time playing the right side ever. So try to get your pass rush going against an offensive line that may be still figuring things out. Throw in Dallas. They're going to have a starting rookie guard in Tyler Booker, 2 starting second-year offensive linemen in Cooper Beebe, and Tyler Guyton. So maybe you get that offensive line hasn't quite come together yet, too. So, yeah, maybe I'm convincing myself. Maybe that's not too bad. All right, next 2 weeks, 2 home games against AFC West opponents. The Chiefs. Paul Dottino gets to try to, stand by the tunnel and see Taylor. He'll be very excited about that. And then Jim Harbaugh comes into town with his Chargers on September 28th. Those are both 1 o'clock games for the Chargers. And then, again, as mentioned, Sunday night for the Chiefs on September 21st. One of the Giants' 3 scheduled primetime games. So, look, Chiefs are awesome. Difficult opponent. They're going to have their stuff together. Andy Reid, he's a really good coach. And then the Chargers are going to – both of them are really physical teams too. And I think the Cowboys, and the Commanders with Dan Quinn, they all play like an aggressive, physical type of upfront type of football. So these 2 home games, I'm happy they're at home. You get back-to-back home games. Maybe, try to establish something in your building a little bit. But obviously, very tough games against 2 really good coaches with 2 awesome quarterbacks in Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. And, 3 out of those first 4 games now, Matt, are against teams that made the playoffs last year. And Dallas just missed. So, not easy.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, those 2 AFC West matchups, weeks 3 and 4, they're going to be tough. I'm not going to sit up here and tell you otherwise. The Chiefs were just attempted a three-peat. They came 1 game short of winning 3 straight Super Bowl championships, which is obviously extremely difficult to do. So, the Chiefs matchup is going to be tough. It's a primetime matchup. The Giants have had some struggles playing in primetime over the years, although obviously Russell Wilson will be the quarterback then. Who knows? But there will be a different quarterback in that primetime game than it has been the last 6 years. So I do think that that primetime narrative, which by the way the Giants did beat the Packers in primetime just 2 seasons ago. So I do think that's a chance to really change that narrative even more so. And again, the Chargers, as you said, they're a very tough-nosed team. I mean, Jim Harbaugh wants to run the football. And the moves that they made in the offseason indicate that I think they even want to run the football more because they went out, they signed Najee Harris, and they drafted Omarion Hampton in the first round. So they have completely, revamped their running back room. They added some big guys up front as well. I will say those 2 AFC West matchups, I think, is going to be very good tests for this new Giants defense because obviously Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, they have had one of the best offenses. Despite some of their struggles last year or 2, I still consider them one of the most dangerous offenses in the NFL. I don't think many people would argue that. And the Chargers have one of the best run games now since Jim Harbaugh has taken over. And obviously, as we know, the Giants' run defense has struggled at times in recent years. So those week 3 and 4 matchups at home, those are going to be really good tests to see where exactly this Giants defense stands.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know.
But Citizens does.
Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
And again, I talked about the offensive lines the first 2 weeks. The Chiefs obviously have a lot of moving pieces on their offensive line as well.
Yep.
We'll see if Josh Simmons is back and ready to go by then. He could be one of their starting tackles that week. He was the Chiefs' pick at the end of the first round. And for the Chargers, Omarion Hampton, that'll be fun, right? He's a really good running back.
Really good.
And I think both of us agree he's going to be a really good running back.
Yeah.
So that could be fun again, a really challenge for the run defense. All right, no pot on this one. It's kind of like it's just there. At the Saints, October 5th. Again, it's one of the teams that right now has one of the worst quarterback situations in the league just because Derek Carr just happened to retire. Nothing you can do about that. So you go on the road after 2 straight home games. You get to go to New Orleans the first week of October. That's really the first chance, I think, that there's a chance the Giants could be a favorite in that game. I don't think that's impossible. It'll probably be the first game Again, injuries can always change things, but that probably will be best chance of being the first game that they're favorited in the season next year.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, I think given the New Orleans quarterback situation, I don't think there are many people that are expecting them to, be a strong contender this year. Obviously, you never know.
I love me some Tyler Shough, but I can't even get on board with that.
Who knows? Tyler Shough could surprise people. I mean, he was a second-round pick. Maybe he plays phenomenal football and leads a surprise, potential playoff run. Who knows?
Not a Spencer Rattler believer?
I think there's more of a chance of the Saints making a surprise run if Tyler Shough is under center. We saw a little bit of Spencer Rattler last year, but I agree. I do think that could be, the first game that the Giants might be considered favorites. But at the same time, this, it is not easy going into New Orleans and playing in that stadium. Because those fans, doesn't matter what the team might look like on paper, those fans come ready to go every single home game, every chance that they get. So I don't care what people might say on paper now or heading into that game. It is always tough going into the Superdome and trying to play the Saints team.
All right. Now here comes the grinder part of the schedule.
Oh, yeah.
October 9th to November 2nd. This is how I've kind of put this together. Philly at home.
Thursday night.
At Denver. By the way, Philly Thursday night's also surprising. That's usually a Sunday night or a 4:25 Sunday game. Amazon must have really pushed for that one. Yeah. Philly on a Thursday. So they get the short week. At least you're hosting Philly in the short week, and Philly has to come to you now. It's only an hour and a half drive, or hour drive, whatever it is. But still, better than going there. At Denver the following week, so you get a little bit of a longer road into a longer road trip, which I guess you like. Russell Wilson returns to Denver for that game, but look, the Broncos have they're good. And I'll get the details of the teams in a second. Then at Philly the following week, Philly 2 out of 3 weeks in the middle of the year. Yeesh. And then you get home versus San Francisco 49ers. So that to me is as tough of a 4-game stretch as you'll see on the schedule. I think it's probably even a little bit tougher than the first 4, though it's close. Just really, really tough stretch there, Matt, through October for the Giants. I guess I'll start here. I think essential for them to be at worst 2-3 heading into that 4-game stretch. Like, you got to figure out a way to win 2 out of those first 5. Because if you head into that stretch, again, at worst, I'd like to get more than that. If you head into that stretch 1-4 and you got to go Philly at Denver, at Philly, home versus San Francisco, that's not a place you want to be in.
No, definitely not. And I feel like this is at least the second time in the last 3 years where the Giants have had a 3-week stretch where they play the Eagles twice.
It's always in December, it feels like, right?
2 years ago, it was late in the season. I think it was week 16 and 18.
Yeah.
This year, it's obviously earlier, week 6 and 8. But look, obviously the Eagles are the reigning Super Bowl champions. They are a phenomenal team. I will say, based on the moves they made in the offseason, I don't think they necessarily got better. I don't think their roster improved drastically because most of their offseason moves revolved around locking up their own guys to extensions.
No, you could argue that they've gotten worse talent-wise.
Yeah, because they lost who
Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. 3 very important defenders for them.
Yeah, but, they agreed to the new contract with Saquon Barkley, with Zach Bond, with Cam Jurgens. So clearly...
Dallas Goedert, too, recently, right?
Yeah, so clearly they went into the offseason saying, let's just rework our own guys, keep our own guys here, which, again, they're the reigning Super Bowl champions. You don't need to get much better when you just won the Super Bowl. So it is a very tough stretch. The Broncos, in between those 2 Eagles games in Denver, again, flying 2 Mile High, that is always a tough road trip for any team, but especially when you have to fly across the country. Bo Nix is coming off a very promising rookie season. They went out and provided Bo Nix with more weapons. We're going to see a familiar face. They signed Evan Ingram this offseason. They spent 2 of their first picks on offensive players.
R.J. Harvey, baby.
R.J. Harvey in the 2nd round, then wide receiver Pat Bryant in the 3rd round. Obviously, not necessarily the biggest name guys in the draft, but talented day 2 picks nonetheless. So that's going to be a tough trip. Sandwiched, between those 2 Eagles games. And then the 49ers. People are sleeping on the 49ers
Are
this
they?
year.
You think?
I mean, I think most people agree that the 49ers will be improved from last year. But, because one of the articles I wrote for the schedule release was one big thing to know about each team, how they sort of changed their roster.
Okay.
And for the 49ers, they really put an emphasis back on their defense. Which those
front on
those
defense.
Super Bowl
Yeah.
49er teams in recent years were built on having elite defenses. They brought Robert Saleh back. He's now their defensive coordinator again for his second stint, and obviously the first stint was quite successful. And then they spent their first 5 draft picks on defensive players. 5. I didn't realize that draft weekend, but when I was putting this article together is when I realized that, and I was like, holy cow, this was an already good defense, and it has the chance to be one of those elite units again, which it had been prior to, I would say, the last year or two. It seemed like it maybe took a little bit of a step back. I fully expect that defense to be right back at where it was. I mean, Michael Williams, Alfred Collins, and Nick Martin were their first 3 picks in the draft. They follow that up with 2 more. I know one of the following picks, I believe, was C.J. West from Indiana, another talented
So it's mostly
lineman.
up front too, right?
Mostly
it's all
up
linebacker
front.
and defensive line.
I will say, though, the offense took a little bit of a hit because they traded Deebo Samuel. And, he might not have had the greatest season last year, but there is no doubt about he is still a very talented wide receiver. He's now playing for the Washington Commanders, so that will be another thing that the Giants will have to face him twice now instead of potentially just once. But their offense sort of looks similar to what it was last year outside of no longer having Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And look, I'll throw a couple themes out. One, Russell Wilson back to Denver October 19th.
Yes, revenge game.
Yep. If he's still starting at that point, we'll see. I think we expect that he would be, but who knows? You never know. The NFL season, weird things happen. Remember, the Steelers played at Denver last year, but he was hurt.
Yep.
With the calf injury early in the year. So you never know how these things are going to go, right? A couple other notes, I think. Look at the running backs the Giants are going to face, Citak. They're going to have Hampton against the Chargers, Alvin Kamara with the Saints, who, by the way, had a really good year last year. People don't realize he was still good.
Yep.
Then you get Saquon Barkley, R.J. Harvey, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. My gosh.
Not easy.
No, and I'll throw out, too, the pace of defenses here, right? You talked about how San Francisco's defense should be much improved with a lot of young guys. Philly's defense might be the best in football.
Oh, yeah. We all saw the Super Bowl.
Denver's defense is one of the best in football.
Oh, yeah.
So you get a 3-game stretch there, and then 4 if you want to count the Niners with their young pieces. Philly, Denver, Philly. That's going to be a real big test for this Giants offense.
Yeah.
Really, really big test.
Yeah. Just to touch on Denver, because I talked about the offensive players they added. Well, they also added Jahdae Barron with the 20th pick in the draft, cornerback, adding him to a group that already consisted of Pat Surtain, an all-pro, potentially the best corner, the best player at his position, and Riley Moss, who is coming off a very, very promising start to his own NFL career. So I'm glad you brought that up, because the Denver Broncos defense is not a defense to sleep on at all. They have been one of the better units in the NFL the last, I would probably say, the couple seasons, despite the offense maybe not matching up to where their defense was. This year, though, Bo Nix in year 2, the pieces they've added on both sides of the ball, no doubt about it. This is a talented Broncos team that is going to be tough flying 2 mile high and facing this team.
Yeah, and look, I talked about how you might have some offensive line vulnerabilities you take advantage of early in the year with, new players, missing pieces, young players, rookies. Well, the Eagles and the Broncos probably have the 2 best offensive lines in football. So that not only will be a test for your offense, it'll be a test for your vaunted pass rush in those 3 games to try to wreak havoc on the opposing quarterback. So, and by the way, the Saints have a bunch of first-round picks on their offensive line too. People forget that, but they do. And then the Niners, we'll see. I thought they would add an offensive lineman in the draft. They didn't. We'll see what that offensive line looks like when we get to that week. Folks, don't forget that the Giants Huddle podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. All right, let's go to the next little pod here, and this is the NFC North pod, is how I'm kind of phrasing this one. You have the Niner game was November 2nd. Bears, and these are all 1 p.m.ers. The Eagles are 1 p.m. at Philly. Again, surprising, not a 4:25 game. That was on October 26th. San Francisco's 1 p.m. at home, November 2nd. Then the NFC North pod. All 1 o'clock games, all Sundays. No complaints. Love the Sunday 1 o'clock games. Let's keep that up. No flexing. Let's keep it where it is, please. You got Chicago, 1 p.m. November 9th. You got Green Bay, 1 p.m. November 16th. That's a home game. The previous game is at Chicago. And then at Detroit, on November 23rd. So, again, I separate this from the previous pod just because they're all NFC North teams, and I thought it was a clever way to do it. But the schedule doesn't get much easier. Look, we don't know what the Bears are going to be, but new coach, Ben Johnson, their offense, they added guards, they added weapons. There's no reason that Bears offense should not be very, very good. It should be very, very good. And then we know how good the Packers are, and we know how awesome the Lions are. So just a really tough group of 3 games there.
Yeah, I mean, this is another just gauntlet part of the schedule, to be honest. I mean, going into last year, the NFC North was kind of considered potentially the strongest division in football.
Yeah, them in the AFC North. Those are the two.
And there's no reason to think that anyone in the division is going to, take a step back. I mean, you mentioned the Bears. The Bears put pretty much, it seemed like, all of their assets towards the offense this offseason. It starts with Ben Johnson, obviously the very successful offensive coordinator the last couple of seasons from Detroit. He is now the head coach of the Bears. But they also traded for 2 guards in Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson. They then drafted Colston Loveland in the first round, Luther Burden in the second round, and then another offensive lineman, Boston College tackle Ozzie Trapillo, in the second round. So they allocated most of their major assets towards building around Caleb Williams. Again, starting with Ben Johnson, but it goes through all those talented players they also added in. The Bears' offense is going to be good this year.
I agree.
I would be shocked if they are not. Moving over to the Packers, I mean, the Packers, they're good. The offense is good every year.
They're just consistent.
They're consistent. Like, their team, honestly, doesn't feel like it changed too much. I mean, they did for the first time in team history. They drafted 2 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds of the draft. They've never done that before. They took a wide receiver in the first round for the first time since 2002.
Yep. Javon Walker, I believe, was the receiver.
Yes, in 2002, right? He was. But so then this year it was Matthew Golden, who was a very talented wide receiver. Yeah. And then Savon Williams, I believe I'm pronouncing that.
Savion, I think.
Savion,
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
from TCU, who honestly looks a little bit like Cordarrelle Patterson, the way he was used at TCU at least.
Very Cordarrelle Patterson.
So, and they already have Jaden Reed in their wide receiver room, along with some of those other guys, Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson. So it is a good Packers offense and a good Packers defense. That's going to be a tough matchup. And Detroit is Detroit. I mean, they went into last year as one of the favorites. They're going to go into this year as one of the favorites across the NFL, especially in the NFC, but in the entire NFL. They are just good up and down the roster. Dan Campbell has that team always firing on all cylinders.
On both sides.
That is a very tough stretch the Giants are going to hit in that part of the, I guess you could call it a little bit past the midway point of the season.
Yeah, and by the way, I haven't mentioned the bye yet, so keep that in mind. Couple things. One, Detroit does have 2 new coordinators. They lost their offensive and defensive coordinators, so we'll see what impact that has on the team. And then a couple of injury issues. You mentioned Watson, the wide receiver for Green Bay. He might not be back yet at that point with his injury. And just to go back further, because I forgot to bring this up before, looking at some of the injuries, I mentioned Josh Simmons for Kansas City. Dak Prescott on September 14th, whether or not, he seems to be fine with the torn hamstring, but something to just monitor as we get there. And there was one other player that I forgot that has a serious injury, and we got to see if he's going to be back or not. And which player was it? I can't remember. It'll come back to me. But there was another player in this group that had a season-ending injury last year, and we're going to have to wait to see whether or not they're healthy. I'll figure it out as we go to the next group here.
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help. Make sense of your money with Citizens.
So my next pod is it's kind of like the Saints. It's just a 1-team pod where there's not much exciting. So I'll put it with the bye week. December 1st, Monday night at New England. Hey, Pearson, I got that one right. I predicted the Giants would play New England on a primetime. I think I said Thursday, but I'll take the win.
Close enough.
That ended up being a Monday night game. I think the Patriots, the danger is that they could be playing well by then. They're a very young team with a good quarterback in Drake May. But that obviously is not a team that made the playoffs last year. And then a week 14 bye.
The latest bye possible.
Yes. So that's the December 7th bye. So there will be no enjoying nice weather anywhere when the Giants have their bye week on December 7th. You notice the Giants are not playing on Thanksgiving. Thank goodness. This year. Not playing on Christmas either. Thank goodness. Appreciate a league office. Mike North, way to look out. I appreciate it, bro. So again, New England's a game that probably, aside from that New Orleans game, the next game that the Giants have potential to be favorites in, depending on how the two seasons go. But it's another primetime game. It's the last primetime game on the schedule. Obviously, games can be flexed into primetime, and there's so many good opponents here. There's a chance I think one or two of these might be if the Giants end up being better than some people think. So, Patriots December 1st, and then the late bye, Matt. I wanted the late bye, and my theory was, I don't think I wanted it this late. I think I wanted it like the maybe
a
Thanksgiving weekend, something like that, like week 12. I think week 12 is what I wanted when we did the show yesterday. I wanted the bye week in there so that the opportunity, and we don't know what's going to happen with it, if they decide to go to Jackson Dart at some point, you get the bye week late, so you can use that bye week to get him ready to play late in the year. Again, you don't know if that's going to be the case. I'm not predicting that. I'm not saying that's what they should do, but in case that's something that comes up late in the year, you have that bye to try to slide him in to that starting lineup.
Yeah, well, let's start with the Patriots game. Similar to what I said about the Bears, the Patriots clearly went into this offseason saying we are going to build around Drake May.
Oh, by the way, it was Brandon Ayuk was the other injured player. November 2nd against the Niners. He's coming off the torn ACL as well. Yeah. That was the other injured guy that I knew might not be. November 2nd is probably right on the edge for him. So that'll be something. Because you mentioned they lost Debo. Yeah. We'll see if Ayuk goes back and Ricky Pearsall's there too. Fair. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, all good. So New England, similar to the Bears, their offseason pretty much revolved around building around Drake May, which makes sense. He's the talented young second-year quarterback, had a promising rookie season, but they went out and signed two offensive linemen, Garrett Bradbury and Wes Schweitzer. They signed Stephon Diggs, which he is also coming off a torn ACL, so it remains to be seen when he will return to the field. I don't know what the reports are saying where he is in his progress. Obviously, this is a later in the season game, December 1st, so he at least has a decent chance at being on the field at that time. But then turning into the draft, they also added more playmakers. They drafted Travion Henderson. Well, first they drafted Will Campbell 4th overall, another talented offensive lineman, perhaps the best offensive lineman in the draft. He was drafted first, at least, at that position. Travion Henderson in the 2nd round. They drafted Kyle Williams, wide receiver from Washington State, in the 3rd round. And then Georgia center Jared Wilson in the 3rd round with 95th pick. So, again, another team that focused on building around their young quarterback. I noticed this, actually. The Giants are playing 5 of the 6 quarterbacks that were selected in the 1st round of last year's draft. The only one they do not face this year is Michael Penix. And
that's interesting.
You see a common theme between most of those 5 teams. I would say 4 of the 5 went into this offseason with the clear emphasis of building around their young quarterback. The only team who didn't make quite as many moves towards helping their young quarterback, I would say, was the Vikings. They made some, but just not as many, clear and evident moves like these other teams did to build around the young guy.
And that situation was so good already that they didn't feel like they had to. Same thing with the Falcons, right? They didn't really add much to Penix. Why? Because you already have Bijan Robinson and Kyle Pitts and Drake London and all those guys.
100%. The other teams, you could make a fair argument that they did need to build around their young quarterbacks a little bit more. So that's the Patriots. The bye week, I agree. I would have liked a little bit earlier bye week. I kind of like when the bye week comes as close to the middle of the season as possible because, you don't want to bye too early in the season because the players really look forward to the bye because it just gives them a time to reset and let their bodies recover and heal a little bit, at least get 1 week off. So you kind of like having it as close to the midpoint point as possible. This is obviously the latest bye possible. And I agree with what you were saying about potential, using the bye week to prepare Jackson Dart to potentially come in, which still could be the case. Depending on how the Giants season goes, they might still decide to wait until the bye week and then see what they have in Dart in the last 4 games of the season. Obviously, a lot can change between now and even the start of the season, let alone as the season progresses. He could be in well before this time. He could not see the field at all, depending on how the season goes. There's a reason why you have to actually go out and play the games. We can sit here and look at the schedule on paper in the middle of May. It doesn't mean anything until the season actually starts and the players actually go out there and start playing these games.
And then the final 4 games, frankly, are probably for the weaker defenses on the schedule based on their rankings and last year's, we know that Brian Flores is an awesome defensive coordinator for the Vikings, but they don't have a ton of like uber talented high guys on that side of the ball. Washington's defense struggled last year. Dallas's defense struggled up front last year, and the Raiders' defense struggled last year. So last 4 games, I think that's a little bit of a theme. So the last 4, folks, it's Washington, Minnesota, at Las Vegas, home versus Dallas. So you finish the year with 3 out of your final 4 games at home. 8 of the first 13, by the way, were on the road, which is very difficult. So you get 3 out of the final 4 at home. 2 division games in there. The final one against Dallas. It's been Philly the last few years, so Dallas a little bit different team to end the season against. Minnesota, obviously a tremendous offense. And look, I think Vegas has an outside shot to be battling for a playoff spot at that point. With Geno Smith as a quarterback, I don't think it's out of the question, but obviously a well-coached team with Pete Carroll. So I think the final 4 games, keep in mind, 3 of them are at home, so you could get some weather in those games. December and January in the Meadowlands can always be hit or miss. Could be dicey. The one game in there at Las Vegas would be a dome game in December, so Tino will be very excited to do his walking through the Las Vegas Strip. That week, he also gets to blend in with a lot of the interesting characters that are around Las Vegas, so he's not kind of stared at as much as he usually is, which I'm sure is nice for him. But those final 4 games, Matt, could be some opportunities there. We'll see. Obviously, tough to try to know what team's going to look like when you get to December after you already played 12 or 13 games.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, 8 of the first 13 games are on the road. Obviously, that is tough. But if the Giants can compete, win some of those games, and still be in contention going into the bye week, all of a sudden you're facing that final month of the season, that final 4-game stretch, 3 games at home. The one, as you mentioned, the one road game is in a dome, so controlled weather. You're not going to worry about wind or snow, rain, anything like that. Then those 3 home games that do potentially have the weather impact, you have the Commanders first, which again, I think the Giants will benefit from having the bye week right before, where you get an extra week to prepare for Jaden Daniels, who, despite only going into second season, is one of the most talented quarterbacks that the Giants are going to face this year. I feel comfortable saying that despite him only having 1 year of experience under his belt, you get an extra week to prepare for him. Week 16, home versus the Vikings. As you mentioned, they are a team that plays their home games in a dome. So they're going to have to now come to East Rutherford, where who knows what the weather's going to be like. We don't know what J.J. McCarthy looks like. He has not stepped foot on an NFL field for a regular season game yet. The Vegas game, which, as you said, I wouldn't be surprised if they're contending for a playoff spot as well, but surely they're not favored in their division. It would be a little bit of a surprise if they are, a bona fide playoff contender come week 17 of the season. And then finally, week 18, Dallas. Again, another team that plays their home games in a dome. They're going to have to come to East Rutherford. You never know what could happen. So as tough as that first significant portion of the schedule is, that 8 of 13 home away games to start, if you can stay in contention, you set yourself up for that last month of the season. You put yourself in a very, very good position where you could potentially make a run at the playoffs. Obviously, a lot can happen. We don't know. There are several different talented quarterbacks on the Giants roster now. We don't know who's going to be playing what weeks. All we know is Russell Wilson's the starter right now. But is it an interesting schedule? Again, as we said at the start, we knew the schedule was going to be tough. We knew all 17 of these matchups. There's nothing new there. The placement of some of them might make things a little bit more difficult than what they potentially could have been. But again, you get through that first portion of the season. If you can stay afloat, you put yourself in a really good position to end the season strong.
All right, and I'll just close with this, and I want to get your take too. The part of the schedule I'm most excited about, I think, has to be the first 2 games. You get tested right off the bat with 2 games that can go a long way to defining how your season is going to go. You're at Washington, you're at Dallas. 2 rivalry games against 2 divisional opponents, one in Washington that made the playoffs last year, one in Dallas, who the Giants have had a lot of trouble beating over the course of the last 8-9 years since Dak Prescott got into the National Football League. So I'm really excited to see how the Giants measure up against those 2 divisional teams. You have to win divisional games if you want to be a good football team. Play 6 of them. You got to win some of those. So I'm really pumped up for those first 2 games just to kind of see how the season starts.
I'm with you. I mean, since Joe Schoen and Brian Dable took over, one of the big talking points going into every offseason was we want to close the gap in the division. Well, here is your chance to show right at the start of the year that they have potentially closed the gap with 2 road matchups against NFC East teams. You mentioned earlier the Giants have had success in Washington, not much success playing in Dallas, and it's been a long time with that. So this is a good chance to buck those trends, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to the 2-week stretch right after that, because it's 2 home games against 2 very talented AFC West opponents. We talked about this earlier. 2 tough teams that are good on both sides of the ball, play physical football. These will just be very good tests for this Giants defense. Same with the weeks 1 and 2, honestly. That's why I think the first month of the season I know that's the time where people say teams are figuring themselves out, but if the Giants can come out strong and surprise some people, you are setting yourself up very well for the rest of the schedule, the rest of the, at times gauntlet of a schedule. The other little section the pod that I'm looking forward to seeing is the NFC North pod.
Yeah.
Because again, as I mentioned earlier, that was one of the best teams, if not the best team in football last year.
Division.
They're going to be one of the best likely again this year. And while closing the gap within the division is obviously incredibly important, when it comes time to the playoffs, you're going up against the rest of the conference as well. So you got to match up against those other teams in the NFC, and this is a great test. 3 weeks in a row, great opportunity for the Giants to show that they are making their way towards belonging in that conversation among the better teams in the NFC.
I'll close with this. Folks, there could be, depending on how the schedule plays out, 8 years between an AFC team traveling to MetLife Stadium. So enjoy the fact that in weeks 3 and 4 this year, you're going to have a chance to see Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert come into your building. 2 of the NFL's best quarterbacks. Mahomes, obviously, a potential future Hall of Famer. Justin Herbert just getting started. And enjoy watching those 2 very talented players play at MetLife Stadium. You can see them in person. 8 years is a long time, folks. A lot of things can happen in 8 years. They could switch teams. They could retire. Anything could happen in 8 years. So enjoy the fact that you get to see Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert at MetLife Stadium, and root on the Giants as they try to beat them in weeks 3 and 4. So,
and maybe you get a glimpse of Taylor Swift in the stands. Who knows?
That is true. Any other celebrities looking forward to seeing this year at the stadium?
I mean, I certainly hope we see more celebrities wearing Giants gear at the games this season.
Absolutely.
I don't really know this celebrity fan. Oh, I guess Paul Rudd's a big Chiefs fan. Maybe we'll see him.
Okay, that's a good one.
Well.
Paul Rudd is a big Chiefs fan. Yeah, I don't really. Maybe
Charger fans. I don't know. The one woman made the face on the broadcast. I don't know. I don't even know. I don't know.
I think we can get the Pope at the game at Chicago November 9th.
I don't think so, but hey, you never know. You never know.
You never know. But the problem is that I would not like the Giants' chances of winning that game.
No.
if the Pope is there supporting the Bears. So how about we avoid that one? All right.
For some reason, I want to see the Pope and Paul Dottino together. I don't know why.
That is a funny image.
The Pope and the Pope Mobile going down the street and Paul speed walking next to it. I don't know why that's funny, but it is. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the Giants Huddle Schedule Reaction Podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. Matt's going to take over for Big Blue Kickoff Live on Thursday. I just found out right before we recorded this that my son has strep throat, so I will be at home taking care of him. Pearson, I will not wish you luck tonight. I will just say enjoy the game, but not too much. For Matthew Citak, I'm John Schmeelk. Go Knicks. We'll see you next time on the Giants Huddle Podcast.